I'm Tami Kiekhaefer. I'm a licensed clinical social worker.
And my name is Desiree Grimaldi. Welcome to Unguarded Minds podcast, where we talk about all the drama, trauma, and gritty things that life throws at you. Today we have a special guest, Jacques Delorme. He is a professional life coach and public speaker who uses his personal experience from a fatal car accident that ended a life of a cyclist. He's a trauma survivor, and we are going to kind of get into everything that he has experienced. Trigger warning about death and things like that, but we look forward to hearing your story, Jack. So welcome.
Well, thanks for having me on. It's been a pleasure.
Thanks for being here.
So we were chatting a little bit before we hit record. We had to pause to get recording, so we didn't answer and ask all the things that we want to share with our audience. But it started out a night, were you driving home?
No, I actually was driving to another province. I'm from Canada. I'm in Saskatchewan. I'm on the prairies. And I had hired a real estate coach to do some training with me to try to learn how to flip houses, all that sort of thing. Paid a lot of money for that. So I was going to see him in Winnipeg, which is in Manitoba. So that's a 5-hour drive from 5.5 hours from me and on a high-speed highway. And I was on my way to see him when the accident happened.
Wow. So tell us what happened.
So it's October 6th, 2022, so about 2.5 years ago. And it's a little bit past COVID era. Like COVID was just still in the remnants of that, which comes into play. And I'm headed east, and I left middle of the afternoon. By the time I got into Manitoba, it's 8 o'clock at night, Manitoba time, and it's pitch black. It's a moonless night, and it's getting late for me. It's 7 o'clock in Saskatchewan time change. And I'm starving. I need food. And I'm looking for somewhere to stop. On the north side of the highway on my left, across the double lane highway, is a gas station. And I'm looking to stop there to grab something to eat. Lots of lights, but no cars. And there's nobody walking around. So I'm thinking, there's nothing happening here. Like it's 7 o'clock in Saskatchewan, everything shuts down because of COVID. Nothing's open. So I'm thinking, there's no town here. It's just a gas station. It's likely not open. So I'm thinking, okay, I'll just keep going. No big deal. I'll try and find a town nearby and hopefully get something to eat. So I'm in the left-hand lane, and the highway at that point goes slightly right and slightly downhill. And as I'm coming around the curve, I never saw him. 24-year-old guy on a pedal bike is riding in the middle of my lane. Dark clothes. He's got a really dark blue sweater, black sweats, dark shoes, and no reflectors, nothing. So especially on a moonless night, I didn't see him anywhere near in time. I didn't hit the brakes. I didn't swerve my steering wheel. I had no chance. And I hit him right dead center of my car going 75 miles an hour. So his body comes up over the hood, smashes my windshield, bounces up and over and lands somewhere in the highway behind me. I hit my brakes hard and I can't see anything. So I use the left-hand side of the highway to figure out where I am so I don't hit the ditch and come to a safe stop. Hit my warning lights and dial 911 and talk to her for a little bit. Checked me out. The airbags didn't go off in my car. So the only issue I had was flying glass from the windshield shattering, and that's it. So I'm perfectly unharmed, just emotionally shaken up. So I tell her that I have my emergency first aid. I've had it for years from being a longtime coach. I said, well, I need to do something. Why don't I go back and try and find this guy and try and offer some help? I don't know if he's alive. I don't know what condition he's in. I don't know anything at this point. So I start walking back, go back a couple hundred feet, and I just have enough light from the gas station that I'd passed that I can actually see something. The light on my phone is useless. It's nowhere near strong enough. So trying to see something was difficult. I eventually found him lying on the middle stripe of the highway, right in the middle of the highway, with his head facing oncoming traffic, and he's not moving. Called to him, nothing. He's not moving. He's not responding. I get warned by the 911 operator I can't go out on the highway because I'm wearing dark clothes. I'm wearing blue jeans and a dark blue golf shirt. So I'm not really visible. I didn't see him. The likelihood of a car seeing me is pretty slim. So it's not safe for me. So wait for the police to arrive, shut the highway down, and we'll get him some help. It's a good thing she said that because it was less than a minute after that, a mid-size SUV comes around the curve. So I'm thinking, great, I've got somebody to help. Somebody can flag them down. They can help me with the body. Use that vehicle to help block off the highway and warn people there's something there. They never slow down. And the instinct when you're driving is you never hit something with the wheels of your vehicle, because what you end up doing is you lose control and you could get into an accident. So you do one of two things. You swerve to avoid it, or you swerve to take it between the front tires and let it pass underneath the vehicle, which is safer. So out of instinct, they swerved left. And I don't know why, because the body's in the middle of the highway. They swerved left and took the body between the front tires. So there's no clearance for a body under a mid-size SUV. There's no way. So as it's passing over, you can hear the clunk of the body underneath the chassis. And as it goes over, it takes the body from this direction and does a complete 180 and launches them headfirst down the highway like an arrow. Got about 7 feet in the air and 50 feet down the highway. Just launched his body. Vehicles braked briefly for about 2-3 seconds, panicked, and hit the gas hard and left. Yeah, no idea. Never saw them again. They never came back. The body eventually had gone through the air, landed and rolled and ended up across the right-hand lane of the highway when it came to a stop. So I'm walking back to my car kind of aimlessly, disappointed and shocked, going, what the hell just happened? And suddenly hear all this noise and all these lights coming from behind me. Semi-flatbed trailer coming around the curve. So I'm waving like crazy, trying to warn him that there's something in the highway ahead of him, and just wave, just screaming. And nothing. He doesn't even brake. Didn't seem, he kind of didn't register that I was trying to warn him of something. And he never slowed down. And you can't change lanes of something that big that quickly. And they hit the body, driver's side tires got him across the pelvis, ran over him again. Front tire flipped his body sideways towards the center of the highway. So only the front tires got the body. The rest of the tires didn't, but it really didn't matter. At this point, there's no chance he's alive. So I, doing the best I can, trying to stay calm and get back to my car. Because right now I'm in a really dangerous situation where a vehicle trying to avoid him could hit me. So I got back to my car, got in. The Sammy had stopped up near my car briefly. But by the time I came out, when the police arrived, he was gone. He had left as well. He panicked and left. So I was the only one that had stopped. So I give my story to police and had to recount it for the EMTs, for the ambulance, for the police twice. So I had to relive the story 4 times over the next 3 hours, telling people what happened, because they're using that to help treat me. Had a cut on my right hand, right here. When I went to put my car in park, I grabbed a piece of glass from my windshield and shoved it into my hand. I'd been bleeding the whole time, never felt it, had no idea. So they had to take me to the hospital a little later and get the glass out. And from there, it's okay, now what?
Wow. A lot to unpack. Well, I know in the state, like it's illegal to be on the highway. Is that a law in Canada?
As a
Like
bike.
you're not to walk, bike, nothing on the highway here.
You're allowed to be on the highway with a bike, but you must have reflectors. He had none.
See, we're
Nothing.
not allowed it.
There was nothing warning me he was there. It's a lighter colored bike that really doesn't help, right? Not when you're going that fast. Like I'm a physics geek. I do science for a living, and I did the calculation on how human reaction comes into play with something like this. It's me trying to be the analytical one to try and figure out, okay, put reason to what happened, right? Mm-hmm. It takes 3/4 of a second for the human mind to register what it's seeing. It takes another 3/4 of a second to actually act on what you saw. So for human reaction time, it takes 1.5 seconds to react to what I just saw when I suddenly saw this bike in front of me. But when you're traveling 75 miles an hour, how far do you travel in 1.5 seconds? 160 feet. I had no chance, none whatsoever, to try to avoid him. And the police knew that when they did their investigation. And they told me that night when I was going to the hospital that there's a very good likelihood that no charges are going to be laid because there's no way I could have avoided him. Mm-hmm. If it wasn't me, it was going to be somebody else who's going to hit this guy, right? Because there's just no way. It was just being so dark, especially in high-speed highway. It's really hard, right?
Well, I mean, two people hit him after you, so I
Yep.
mean,
Right.
if you
Were they
didn't,
ever?
those cars were still coming.
Yep.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Were they ever able to identify who this gentleman was?
As far as I know, yes. I didn't try to. I
Mhm.
wasn't ready for that. I may at some point, not because I want to go talk to the family, because I have no desire to do that, because I have no answers. And that's the fear I had with trying to find out who he was. I don't want the family knowing it was me, because they'll have all sorts of questions that I can't answer. I don't know his state of mind. I don't know why he was there. I don't know those answers, right? We suspect we know based on the evidence that we had. The interesting thing about the human mind is that it collects a lot of information in a very short period of time when under stress. So something like what happened to me, suddenly something's right in front of my car on a high-speed highway. In that split second before I hit him, I collected 10 times more information than I normally do, because that's how the brain works. It's like a snapshot. Take a Polaroid camera and take a snapshot of his body right before I hit him. That's the picture I have in my head all the time. And I'll never forget it. I can tell you to the minutest detail exactly what he was doing and what he looked like. Right? Short, dark hair, dark blue sweater, zip up, white shirt underneath, longer sleeves because you can see the white sleeves beyond the cuffs, black sweats, light colored shoes, silver bike. I can tell you all that. But I can also tell you he was looking down. I can also tell you he wasn't pedaling. So what does that tell you? When you're on a bike and you're trying not to get hit, what's the first thing you do? You look back to go, okay, I'm trying to avoid something coming at me. I need to see where it is and pedal like hell to get away from it. He did neither one of those two things.
Your idea is he was intentionally out there in the middle
Yeah.
of the highway with dark
Well,
clothes.
yeah, because you couldn't see him, but being somebody on a bike, like you can see the headlights coming
Oh,
behind you.
absolutely.
Like he knew that you were coming, even if you didn't see him.
Yeah.
State of mind under an influence or an intentional suicide.
Yeah. And that's what, in talking to the police the next morning after their investigation, everything had happened, all the evidence they had, they went, yeah, there was no chance he was leaving that highway alive. He was there intentionally trying to kill himself.
Wow.
And he picked the first vehicle that came around that curve and did it. Yeah.
So how did you cope with the emotional side? It sounds like the analytical side was helped just give you the reassurance you didn't do anything wrong. Here's how the brain works. Here's how you collect data. Here's, and then there's that emotional side of like, oh my gosh, what just now happened?
Yeah. The very first thing your brain does, it does the what ifs. And that happened right after I hit him. And that started before I even saw the next two collisions. That had already started. Doing the what if I'd left home sooner? What if I'd stopped for food? Which is why I tell that part of the story. I was looking to stop and I didn't. What if I had? Would I have hit him? If I'd left home sooner and come through there in the daylight, would he have been there yet? Because he would have intended to make sure somebody hit him. He would have done it at night, which is why he wore dark clothes. Right? He wouldn't have done it during the day. So I would have missed him entirely. Somebody else would have hit him. So what if, but all the what ifs in the world do what? Nothing. I can't go back and change what happened. All the what ifs in the world do me absolutely no good. All it does is make my brain go on fire. So what I needed to do is to start to look at what now? Like look at, okay, what am I going to do as a result of what happened? I need to do something. I need to know a plan. I'm stuck in another province over 4-hour drive from home with no vehicle and nowhere to stay. Now what? I gotta survive. So I started looking at, okay, hotel that's booked for me in Winnipeg. Okay, I need to get rid of that because I'm not going to Winnipeg. I need to get rid of that. I need to find a place to stay. There's a hotel not far from the hospital they're taking me to in the city nearby. I can stay there. Okay, I'll have to book that hotel. Did that, got on the phone and started doing something to try to at least try to progress to get my brain to at least settle down a little bit. I've got a plan to get out of this in some way. So I started doing those things. It was hard. It was hard to concentrate because there's so much running through my head. Having the ambulance attendants were really good. It's a half-hour drive to the nearest city, so they had a chance to talk to me and calm me down. I still hadn't eaten anything since noon. It's now 11 hours later. I haven't eaten. So they stopped and got me food, and they refused to let me pay for it, which is kind of nice. So I got some food finally. Kind of choked some of that down because I was actually hungry. I was able to actually eat something, which wasn't bad. But it's the matter of now I'm by myself in a hotel room in a foreign city that I've never been in and nobody to talk to because it's 11 o'clock at night. Who's awake? And I'm part of my brain's just going, I don't want to bother somebody with my petty problems. So I start to basically go in. That's what a lot of men do is they go inwards and they deal with it. They're taught in society that be the alpha male. You never cry, you never show emotion. You just suck it up and you man up. Well, that's the first instinct that I had as a man is I needed to man up. So I got quiet. I called a couple of people I needed to talk to try and get some advice. My parents being one, come get me. They're the closest people, and they're east of Regina from where I live. They're an hour east, so they're closer at least. So I called them and they're retired, so they have the time. Got them to come and get me the next day. So that was one important call, and I called my real estate coach to say, hey, I'm not coming. So he knows. And I called one of my best friends who's a cop to find out how much trouble I'm in. Am I going to get charged with something? Am I going to get charged with vehicular manslaughter? Right? Because it wasn't intentional, so it's not murder, but manslaughter is different. Somebody died. So that's all working in my head of, am I going to jail? Am I ever even going home? Am I going to get stuck here and get remanded in custody? Because all these questions are just flooding my brain for the next several hours. And I don't know answers to them.
So your first response, obviously, is getting yourself through it. Did once you got past that, did you experience the guilt or the thought, intrusive thoughts of how their family was going to be, how this was all going to play out beyond, you obviously weren't going to be charged because it was an accident and he was somewhere that he shouldn't have been the way that he was, but I can only imagine you went through different stages of okay, get myself safe, get myself fed, get a place to stay. Am I going to be charged? But then a form of guilt or curiosity of his family or about him, or did any of that set in shortly after? Or
one of the first things that sets in when you start looking at something like what I experienced was fear. The two bigger ones were one, fear his family was going to come after me. So I didn't want to know who he was. I did not want to know who his family is. I did not want them contacting me. Good thing about media is they never post names. So they said a 55-year-old man from Regina was involved in an accident with a cyclist, yada, yada. I saw the news report. I saw it a couple of days later, and yeah, they never gave a name. They didn't say who I was. There's no way people finding that out unless they did some really good digging. And then the victim, I could find out who he is because you simply go into the obituaries, find out somebody of that age who died on that day. I know what city he's from, so I could easily find that. I chose not to. I just out of fear of I don't want the family knowing, so I don't want to know who he is. If I don't want them knowing me, I don't want to know him either. Right? So I just avoided that. And the other bigger fear was being labeled. I didn't want people finding out that what happened with my accident and labeling me a killer. That scared me a lot, especially with somebody in the education field. That scares me. I don't want that label could kill me. My career could be yeah, people will see that. And that was a legitimate fear I had. Is it realistic? No. It was an accident, nothing more. But when you go through something like this and end up with PTSD, you don't think rationally. And it took me a long time to try and get to the point where I was resolved enough with what had happened. And I'd been through enough of my healing process, the things that I was doing, to get to a point where I could start to tell people. I told very few. Initially, it was my closest friends and family, and that was it. My boss, so that they knew. I went back to work in a week. I didn't even take much time off of work.
So just curious, did that emotional side just kind of shut down then? Because it was what's going to happen to me? I can't talk about this. I don't want to get in trouble. I don't, did that emotional side just kind of shut down, and did it kick in later when just the reality of oh my gosh, I ended somebody's life, and like, holy cow, well, all those other emotions, did that kick in later?
It never actually left. It actually created a rather large issue right from day one, that my stress level, if you do a gauge of 1 to 10, my stress level is a constant 6 or 7, and it never changed. Right? It never dropped below that. I was never in a relaxed state for weeks, months on end, where that stress level was always there. And any little trigger that triggered any sort of stress in my life took me to a 10. And I just want to hide. I want to go home. I want to go hide underneath my covers in my bed and just escape and hide, because I can't deal with the pain. Right? And that was my day every day. And it's just a matter of trying to find a way to cope where I could start to take the memory that I have and start to come to terms with it and stop the emotional and physical reaction I was having. It was both at the same time. You take the state I was in immediately after the accident happened, where you got that big lead ball in the middle of your chest, your sternum, and you just feel that stress ball. It just doesn't want to stop. And you just can't stop that pain from being there. That was the state I was in immediately after the accident. The triggers were taking me right back to that state every single time. There's a connection going back to that state, back to that state. And it's just a reoccurring pattern of just not being able to stop it from happening. Yeah. The littlest things is all it took to get me to trigger. I drive to work in the morning. It's dark, but there's street lights, so it's a little bit different than normal dark, because it was dark on the night of the accident. So pitch black would be a problem driving, but with the street lights, I can see, so I can avoid anything. But in one street I drive on, there's lots of shop windows because it's a commercial area. And a flash of light off of a window the one time I was driving was enough to set me off. Because it was a flash of like something was coming at me. It's that fear, like reptilian brain tries to protect you. So it's always having these little things it picks up, warning me that, oh, it's somebody else jumping in front of you again. So it's a trigger, and it takes you right back to that state again. Somebody riding a bicycle on the side of the road, and me trying to pass them was hell. That happened a couple of times where somebody's just riding a bike. They're not going to dart out in front of me. That's not normal, right? This is an abnormal situation, but my brain doesn't think that way. Right. Slow right down, pull way over to the opposite side, slowly pass by them, trying to make sure that I don't hit them. Somebody on the sidewalk wearing dark clothing, the dark clothing piece being the connection back to the cyclist. It just triggered me right away. Scared that they're going to just jump off the sidewalk and jump in front of my car. Right?
Brain is pretty powerful. It's amazing what it comes up with.
Yeah.
So how did you, what were your next steps to try to cope and manage the post-traumatic stress and the re-traumatization? What were your next steps?
One of the things, the officer, a corporal, was on duty the night of the accident. And after he and I talked really briefly at the accident scene, his biggest recommendation he gave me was that get help, find someone to talk to. He goes, this is not a first for me. We had another cyclist hit on this highway a month ago where he also died. And it's like, we've seen this before. We've seen the results. And he goes, it may be okay right now. You're not too bad, but give it 2-3 days. Maybe give it 4 days, maybe give it a week. You're going to be in trouble. Your brain's going to start to attack, and you're not going to feel very good, and you're going to start to have some trouble. And he said, get some help, get somebody to talk to. I was on my way home the next day with my parents driving, and I made the phone call to my health provider through work to get counseling, because I knew that I'm going to take his advice and I'm going to try and get some help right away. And the response I got was, we can book you in for next Thursday. This was a Thursday. It's a Thursday afternoon. So it was a full week. And it's like, yeah, that's not going to do it. I'm in bigger trouble than that. I need help now. So she goes, okay, so we can get you on a call list. So what basically will happen is the people who are doing these other calls with people, then the regular appointments, if they have time, they'll get a hold of you. If they don't, it could be a few days. That was her response. So really not a lot of help. I said, fine, put me on the call list. So I had a lady call me 5 hours later. This was 2:00 in the afternoon, so 7:00 that night. I get a phone call, and it's a younger lady based on the voice, and really not very helpful. She was acting like a kindergarten teacher, if you understand what I'm saying. You have a little 5-year-old who suddenly scrapes their knee in the playground and you're trying to console a young child. That's the way she treated me. It's okay, you'll be all right. And no, actually, I'm not going to be all right now. I just need somebody to talk to. But she didn't get that. She kept trying to console me like a child. And that's the absolute last thing I needed. What I needed to do was vocalize. What I needed to do was talk about it. But she wasn't helping. So I shut down. I did the night before, is I completely shut down. And I stopped talking. Conversation at that point really wasn't overly useful. She recognized that. She said, well, if you want to talk to someone else at some point, just call back in and we'll get you in touch with somebody and you'll be able to get some help. So basically what you're telling me is I had to tell you my story. If I call in again, I have to tell somebody else my story. If I call in again, I tell somebody else my story. So you want me to relive the pattern over and over? Yeah, that's not going to help me. So the whole process of how they were trying to offer help was just not effective and not what I needed based on the situation I was in. Right. So it's like, no, that wasn't going to happen. So I had to find another way. So I started making some calls, making some connections. My life coach from Winnipeg has a life coach. He's my real estate coach, and he has a life coach that he uses who also is trained in some other modalities. So he said, well, talk to her, see if you can make a connection. So I talked to her. NLP, called Neuro Linguistic Programming, is something she is trained in. So we used that, and after even just a couple sessions, was making a big difference, was helping a lot. So for those who don't know what that is, it's a way of using communication and visualization in your own mind to be able to deal with something that you're struggling with, something you're dealing with. So for me, it was doing a 10,000-foot view of the accident, being able to see it, have the reaction I'm having in my body, and be able to control and to manage what my body and my emotions are doing in that moment. But from a 10,000-foot view, it's very distant, so it's manageable. And as we kept doing more sessions, I got closer and closer and closer until I'm basically standing on the side of the highway where the accident happened and being able to manage the stress from that perspective, which really over time helped a lot to be able to make that disconnect between my triggers and going back to that state that I was in after the accident. Right? It's trying to get my body to not have that central nervous system reaction. So I wasn't constantly feeling sick and having that lead ball in my chest all the time. So as that went on, it took a lot of practice of doing that. It's there's nothing in writing saying that it's going to take you 6 months. It's going to take you a year. It's going to take you 5 years. It's going to take you 3 days. Like there's nothing written in stone that says it's going to take X amount of time because everybody's a little different. So it may have worked for me over the span of a few months, but for somebody else, it could take a lot longer or it could take a lot less. Like it depends, right?
So NLP, neuro-linguistic programming, is that something that you could learn how to do and then eventually walk yourself through that process? Or do you have to have somebody there walking you through the process?
With what I found, because of the nature of what I was doing, it helped to have somebody else there to walk me through it.
Okay.
They did help a lot. Yeah, I went through 10 sessions of it with her before we were done with it, right? Okay. And by that point, I'd gotten enough practice with it. I understood what to do with my mind and how to control my emotion. I was able to do a lot of that on my own. Sure. And to be able to just basically practice every day, getting used to how to control my emotions, control my mind, and not let my mind and my reptilian brain control me.
Take over. Yeah.
Right. Okay. If they was basically taking over on me, I needed to get control back.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then, so from there, you've transitioned into being a life coach. Is that right?
Yeah. It was 10 months after the accident. It was the end of August, 2023, that I decided that I needed to take the next step and tell my story. So I wrote a book. Driving Out of Darkness is my book. It's on Amazon, it's on Barnes & Noble. I've gotten it out since then, but I started writing it in August. And it only took me a couple of months of really concentrating on trying to get the story out and then refining. And of course, you always add things as you go, you do your edits. But I had the book done by the latter part of December, did some more major editing, getting the publishing piece kind of organized. And by February 1st, the book was out. And that's when I started.
Did you self-publish?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, self-published through Amazon. Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
really easy to do. It's just, it takes time more than anything. And once you've learned how, it's really not difficult. It wasn't expensive to do. It's not like the traditional publishing, which takes a lot of money. This didn't.
Mm-hmm.
No, I just took the time to do it. And I wanted to be able to do it myself and take the time and just do it a piece at a time and not be rushed. Take my time with it because it's still part of my healing process for me.
Mm-hmm.
So I didn't want somebody else to suddenly rush me with it. So that was really good. I got through that part of it. And that's when I decided that, okay, if I'm going to have this story, what can I do with it that's going to have a positive impact? So I decided to take the training to become a professional life coach, finish that, did that December and November of that same year, finished that at the same time, and haven't really used it a lot from that perspective. I do more of the public speaking piece. That's the part that interests me more right now, is to get my story out and to talk to people. That hopefully my story will help somebody else to understand that even when you go through something as horrific as what I saw and what I experienced, there's still a light at the end of the tunnel where you can come out the other side and you can get better. My major struggle was that my counseling sessions were 1 to 2 weeks apart. What do you do in between? And that's what I wrote a lot about in my book, was what can you do for yourself? What is the self-care piece? That's the subtitle of my book. It's self-care strategies for trauma recovery, right? Which is what I went through. What can I do for me that's going to help me get better in between all these sessions, which were helping, but I don't see you for a week or 2 weeks. So if I have a collapse partway through, who do I talk to? What do I do? What are the things I need to be able to do for me to try and control my life, control my mind?
Without giving your secrets away, could you share one of your self-care strategies that was helpful for you?
I'll give you a couple. One's perspective. One of the things I found was happening is that my triggers were happening over the course of a day on basic everyday stuff was causing me to have a trigger and going back to that state I was in with the accident. I needed to find a way of getting the triggers to calm down, to stop happening as often. For example, driving. Somebody cuts you off in traffic. What's the normal human response? You flip on the bird, you yell, you scream, you honk your horn, and you get pissed off. As soon as I do that, my stress level goes from a 6 or 7 to a 10. So there's my problem point. I can't get that stressed up that high because I start to collapse. So I did the opposite. So I took my perspective and went, okay, so let's flip that on its head. Stop looking at my ego. Stop looking at me. Start looking at them. Maybe they're just a bad driver. But what about somebody else who is so distracted and there are so many bad things happening in their life? That's why that happened. So if you honk your horn, you get pissed off at them, you start tailgating them, you do all these things, you're adding to their day on something you yourself are trying to avoid. So I put myself in their shoes. Walk a mile in their shoes, as they say, right? So if I don't want somebody else doing something to me to trigger me, should I really be doing the same thing to someone else? So my perspective changed. So if somebody would do something that I wasn't really happy with, it'd be okay, I still stand up for myself. I still set boundaries. Don't get me wrong. But at the same time, my reaction was different. I'm not reacting with that negative intensity that I was before because I knew I couldn't. I'm already high strung. So when you get to that kind of a state, getting pissed off and getting angry at somebody was really easy. So by trying to manage that piece and trying not to have it blow up and send me to that trigger to a level of 10 stress level, by managing that and not allowing myself to get escalated, help me to control those triggers to then be able to deal with them. The other piece I found was a major one was the meditation piece. Being able to be mindful. It's like a timeline. Anything to the left side of my timeline is the past. Like me living in my past with that accident isn't going to help me. Like that's just going to make things worse. Being in the center of the timeline right in front of me is the now, the present moment, the mindfulness piece of where am I right now in my life? What am I doing? And then everything to the right is my future state. What I needed to do is live more in the mindful and future state and stop going back to the past. I need to start to make that little bit of a disconnect, not to forget what happened, but to look forward to something else so that my mindset changes. Be mindful of what I'm doing now, like go out in nature and go for a walk and listen to the birds, walk in the rain, smell the rain, right? Feel grass on your feet when you're walking barefoot, right? Doing things from a sensory perspective too, but just being in nature to just recognize where I am in the here and now, that this is me, being grateful for what I have in my life.
Mm-hmm.
Research fact, you cannot be grateful and be upset at the same time. They're yin and yang.
Have
So
you
if we
read
can be
my book?
grateful,
You're spot on. Yeah.
yeah. If
It's
you're
impossible.
grateful,
It's
you
impossible.
can't have that negative attitude, right? So
Right.
first thing in the morning, last thing before I go to sleep, I'm grateful. I pick 5 things, 5 random things. Could be anything. It doesn't matter what they are. You just have to find things you're grateful for. In the morning, smell of fresh coffee. The sun's shining. It's not cloudy today. I'm grateful for that. I'm grateful for my kids. I'm grateful my family's healthy. I'm grateful I have the home I live in, right? Et cetera, et cetera. Anything. Doesn't matter what it is. Be grateful for it and mean it. And you
And it's
find that your mindset
astonishing.
changes and your whole feeling changes, right?
Quickly. Like
Quickly.
it's almost
Yeah.
instantaneously when you can shift that into a gratitude perspective.
Yeah. What you think about the last 5 minutes before you go to sleep is what your subconscious mind will work on all night. So if I go to bed,
Yells at me being on TikTok before bed. He's like, get off TikTok.
exactly, like social media, no. Screen time, nope. That screen time's done. No, screens are off, right? No TV, no nothing, an hour before bed sort of idea, right? So that I put my brain into the right state of mind so that my subconscious mind isn't working on something really negative overnight. Because what tended to happen, I'd think about something with the accident, wake up in the morning in a panic because my brain's been working on that all night. That's a problem. I can't do that. I got to avoid that trigger, avoid that stress level going to 10. That was my problem point. So by going to bed, having gratitude, being grateful for something, think about something positive I'm trying to do with my life, let my subconscious mind work on something positive and give me some ideas overnight. That's much more useful time for my subconscious than to worry about what happened with an accident. And that did wonders. I wake up 3 in the morning with all sorts of ideas, which is wonderful. And it tended to happen fairly often. Have a notebook beside your bed and you write these things down, right? Next morning, same thing. My mornings tended to be bad. I get up in the morning just being a little bit of a panic and not looking forward to my day. That needed to change. So my mindset in the mornings had to change. First thing I did, no phone, don't even look at it. Go downstairs to my little Zen zone and start my meditation. Usually 20 minutes minimum, half an hour of just being mindful, getting into the right state of mind, being grateful, doing gratitude, doing affirmations, doing those things, and then doing journaling as part of it, where it's using the same statement every day, going, today is going to be a fantastic day because fill in the blank. What am I looking forward to? What am I trying to accomplish? What am I trying to do on this day that's going to get me to a better state, going towards my higher self, as we call it, rather than worrying about what happened in that accident? What am I going to do next? What am I looking forward to? So for me, it was the book. It was the starting with the life coaching concept of trying to, anybody who wanted to talk to me about the accident, I would talk and say, here's some of the stuff I did, and they would learn something from me. That was the whole intent of why I stuck with the public speaking a little bit more so, is to try to contact more people. So a lot of what I do with my journaling is looking at what can I do next to have an influence? Who can I talk to next? What other groups can I talk to? Who else can I present to? Who else can I have take this information and help them with in some way? And do that consistently every day.
And such a huge part of anxiety is not having a sense of control over your environment and also your cognitive thought process. Those two things I feel like make up anxiety. So you had a situation you had zero control over, and then you had all the what if and worst case scenario of your cognitive process. And it sounds like you took it and said, okay, here's what I don't have any control over, but here's what I do have control over. And you've shifted that into helping other people and talking about your story and giving some validation, but also understanding gratitude and meditation and your sleep patterns. So it sounds like you've really, looked at every aspect that you can take to gain a little more control over your life.
Yeah. It had everything to do with control.
Yeah.
And that's where the mindfulness became the starting point, because my brain was always on fire.
Yeah.
My brain's
That's
always
right.
going back, trying to protect me, but it always went back to the accident and always made me fearful of what's the next accident that's coming. Because that's what your brain does. That's what the reptilian brain is designed to do.
And
That's how we
you're
survived as
right.
a
It's
species back in the day, right?
supposed to. It's
And always
doing
being
its job.
careful of what's the next fear, what's the
Yeah.
next bear, saber-toothed cat that's going to come and attack me, right?
Yeah.
What's the next snake is suddenly going to bite me? It's like that's what the reptilian brain was designed to do. But in
Right.
this day and age, because of everything we do from a technology standpoint, a lot of those fears are unfounded. But your brain is still trying to do what it does. So it just runs that whole scary scenario of the whole negativity just kicks in and causes all sorts of havoc with your brain.
In your worst case scenario, you actually lived it. So it's not just, oh my gosh, what if a saber-tooth tiger comes out and bites me? I mean, it's like, holy cow, you lived your worst case. So it's also a reality that you had to sort through.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And they say that 80% of the stuff that you fear happening in your life never does.
Never even happens.
So why are you worrying? Why do you worry so much? 80% never even happens, right?
Well, it never happens, but then also you don't get to control how it happens if it is going to happen. So I struggle with that. I am a control freak. I play everything out in my head 30 different ways of how it's going to happen. And my husband's like, what are you going to do about it? I'm like, I don't know. I'll be prepared. He's like, no, you won't. It's never going to go the way that you plan it to go. I'm like, I did it 20 different ways. He's like, it'll happen the 25th way.
Absolutely right, too. That is absolutely the way it works. Yeah.
Yeah. So, so you're a life coach. You're doing more speaking engagements. So, is that how you would like people to reach out to you, or is it mostly Driving Out of Darkness, your book? Is that the best way for people to find you?
Driving Out of Darkness I use that as kind of my branding initially. So that is where you'll find me on my Facebook page. You'll find it on Instagram, on TikTok, LinkedIn. It's my name. DrivingOutofDarkness.com is my website. It's the page that I use for bonus stuff from my book. It's got a glitch in it I'm fixing, but that's no big deal. It's a contact form there still. People can DM me on Instagram or TikTok, no issue. I'm on there just checking messages, and I've communicated with people on both, no issue. I'll talk to anybody who wants to have a chat. Even somebody who's looking at what other strategies can you help me with, because I'm struggling with something that happened in my life. I've had others. I had a contact whose 17-year-old daughter was killed in a car accident. It's like, how do you deal with the loss of a child? Right? It's tough. Right. And that's where it's just, here's some of the strategies I found that help me. I'm not saying they're going to work. I'm not a medical professional, so I'm not officially a counselor. I'm not stuff from that perspective. It's just helping with ideas on, this is something I found worked for me. And if it's something that can help you, great. I'll even show you how to do it. Like using box breathing, using breathing methods, right? Is another way that I've looked at it. The little creature thing that I do, and for how to deal with your emotions, make them emotion to a creature, and then you deal with that creature, right? Trying to make sense of some of the emotions that you have, right? There's all sorts of little strategies I found that some work, some were but I'll even tell you the ones that didn't. And maybe it's something that would help them in the process of their healing, right? And I'm okay with that. Right? As long as I can help somebody, I'm okay with that.
Right. Well, we really appreciate you being on. Oh, were you going to say something, Desiree?
I was just going to say we'll link all of that in this podcast so that everybody has multiple ways. I already pulled your book up on Amazon while we were talking, so we could link that. Again, one question I do have, though, is in the beginning you said you didn't want to know who it was, you didn't want to talk to the family, none of that. Do you think with all your public speaking, your book, the podcast you do and stuff, that do you ever get fearful that the family will put it together and reach out to you?
We know what the date was because I've openly mentioned that, because it gives a context for time frame. So that in and of itself, and being a cyclist is probably enough, and being in a certain province, it's probably enough that they may figure that out. And if it happens, it's fine. I've been through enough of my healing process that I can probably have that conversation without completely freaking out. It still would be extremely hard, But you notice the one
Yeah.
thing I didn't do is I never said the town that I was close to.
Yeah.
I still keep it somewhat anonymous as far as where really I was. It's somewhere in Manitoba, but that's a big province. So it could be anywhere along that number one highway. And who knows if there was another one, but the likelihood is pretty slim because that's a very, I'm a public speaker, but I'm not that big, right? Even if I was big, it's like, what's the likelihood that they actually would run into this conversation, right? So I think I'm pretty safe, but at the same time too, part of me wants to try and find out who he was
I was just going to
at some
say,
point.
is there just a tiny bit of an intention of, if I can put this out, maybe they'll find me and I don't have to find them. And
Yeah,
maybe
well,
that's your
maybe.
next level of healing.
Yeah,
But
that's kind of the next level of healing, the next part of the process, I think, of where this could go. I've started to think about that just even in the last month of, do I try to find out who he was? So I have a name. I've never seen his face. No. His bike was 45 degrees away from me. I saw the back of his head when I hit him. When he was on the pavement, he's like this. So when I was from behind, I saw the back of his head. His face is hidden by his arm. After the other collisions, I walked by and didn't even look sideways because I've seen what happens to deer when they're hit by vehicles, and I wasn't going to look. I didn't. So I've never actually seen his face.
And maybe that would be, it sounds like you're so in tune with your body and your mind and what you need. And maybe that was part of the defense mechanism, is I don't want to personalize this situation at all. And I will, if and when I'm ever ready to, but I would imagine the details make it even more real.
Yeah.
And so it sounds
I wouldn't want that image burned in my head.
You've
That
got
would be a whole nother level of
having seen,
and healing.
if I saw his face or had to touch the body and trying to administer first aid, I think that makes this exact accident way worse.
Yeah.
It's kind of a blessing in disguise that I wasn't able to go out there to administer any first aid, because that would have made it worse.
And you don't have to answer me, but was it ever like a rationalization? I don't know if you ever got the information, but like a rationalization of like, your hit wasn't the one that killed him. Maybe it was the second one. Maybe.
No way of knowing that. There's no way of medically knowing that. We don't know.
No, but I'm saying in your brain, was there ever like some rationalization to, maybe I wasn't the one who killed him per se? You know what I mean? Like, maybe it was the second car. Yes, I hit him, but maybe like just any sort of rational. Because I know that when people are fearful and they're trying to heal, they can rationalize things. Well, I did this because of this, or this may have happened, or just the brain trying to protect itself, or the nervous system.
Yeah. What you're saying though, it has a double-edged sword to it. Right? And here's the parallax that's created by that. If my collision killed him, there's nothing I could have done to save him. And I have the guilt of I killed him. Right? Actually, that's a terminology that I learned about a month after the accident that I stopped using. Right? Because when you say that term to somebody, what is it actually stating? Premeditated. When I killed somebody, that's premeditated. Mine was never premeditated. This is never premeditated. Right? So that terminology is actually incorrect. He died in an accident I was involved in. Is more accurate, right? So by the accident, it had somebody die as a result, right? So did that death, was it caused by me? Okay, that's a kind of a double-edged sword, because you take a look at the other side that my accident didn't. The second one did. If I'd pulled him off the highway, he'd still be alive. So there's a double-edged sword on it, right? So it's how you look at it. It's like, that's just not a game I'm willing to play. At this point, what we do know is that he is absolutely dead after the first two. The third one didn't matter. The third one's just adding insult to injuries, all that was doing. But one of the first two definitely ended his life. We don't know which one. We don't know too much about his body after my collision, because there would have been so much damage done by the second one. We don't know what was caused by mine. So it's kind of you don't know. You take a look at the picture of the vehicle. I can send you that too. I have a picture of my car. I've only got one. I tried to do a Freedom of Information Act request through the RCMP to get pictures of the scene and everything. They have nothing. They didn't take anything. If they did, they don't know where it is. So I couldn't get anything. See, the only picture I have is of my car the next morning. Turns out the auto wrecker that towed my car was a block from the hotel I was staying at.
Mm.
So I went over and saw my car in daylight because it was night when it happened. So and I got a picture of it. But you can see the imprint on the windshield or where his body was. His hips were down at the bottom of the windshield and his head was up where the top of the car was. So his head would have hit the top of the car.
Mm.
Would that have been enough to kill him at 75 miles an hour? Likely. Am I guaranteed that it happened? Nope. I can't guarantee it. I don't know. And we'll never know.
You know what I was thinking too is with your story getting out there and the details that you have and that you've shared, is there an SUV driver out there who's connecting, going, oh my God, that
was
me.
me. And the semi driver.
To my truck.
Or the semi driver, yeah.
The semi driver realizing that his collision with the body had absolutely nothing to do with his death.
Yeah.
He's already dead.
Yeah.
Right.
It's just,
and you've done that healing work, like as somebody with anxiety and control issues and all the things, like if I was that SUV driver, like they're living, looking over their shoulder every day, not knowing if they were the cause or if, like I couldn't live like that. And to know that there's two other individuals out there who don't know if they caused somebody to lose their life in an accident. And they're okay walking around every day like that.
Yeah.
Well, and it's that ripple effect, we have no idea how it affected their lives or what they did with that information and how they've relived it, or if they have talked to people, or if they've written their own books, or, that you're publicly out there. And it's just a curious idea to wonder, but you've got to find your own closure. And I don't know, was it ever really closed? But I think closure is how you have to learn how to deal with it so you can get in a car and drive again, so that you can see a biker on the road and maintain a level of, calm.
Yeah.
And that's sometimes that's the best closure you can have sometimes.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
About 3 months ago, I'm driving on a little bit higher speed road here in the city. So I'm going about 70 kilometers an hour and light's green and a bicyclist comes across the intersection right in front of me going across. And I didn't react. So I had a little bit of a reaction, more upset that this guy would do that, more than it was a reaction taking me back to the trigger, back to my action. So that's how far I've come. And I've been able to get to a point where even that happening was okay. I was able to deal with it and not have it trigger me really badly.
It's growth.
Well, we are going to list everything in the bottom of the podcast so that people can buy your book, find you, DM you, follow you, all the things. And we thank you for coming on and sharing your story with us.
Well, thanks very much for having me. I'd love to reach out to as many audiences as I can.
Absolutely. Yeah. Thank you so much. It was great to meet you, and thanks for sharing your story.
Well, thanks very much.